Hello, and welcome to the Lifecycle and Phase Inputs and Outputs module, where we're going to talk about the integration between the different lifecycle phases. My name is Dr. Suzanne Van Hove, and I will be your instructor for this module. What we're going to look at here is the generic lifecycle inputs and outputs, and then the specific lifecycle inputs and outputs by phase. So this is some very, I'm going to say it, dry information, but it's information that you absolutely must know and must be comfortable with. There is a handout, and the handout is incorporated. So this handout called Inputs and Outputs version 1 is actually incorporated into the enlarged slides and handout document that you can get from the download section of the course page. Before you go any further, go get that handout, make sure that you have it, because if you don't, what we're going to be talking about is not going to make sense. You need to follow along with the various tables. Now, hopefully that's enough of a warning here. Next warning is that, I'm going to say it again, you have to know this information. I'm not going to read you this information, I'm just going to tell you that up front, but I am going to tell you how to learn it and what it is that you can maybe create some shortcuts. That, I think, is the best way to handle this. This is mandatory learning from the syllabus, for the MALC course, is that you know this set of 6 tables. Okay, so we can't get around it. It's on the syllabus. So without any more doom and gloom here, let's go ahead and start looking at these inputs and outputs. Now, this first one, the generic service lifecycles inputs and outputs, I've given you on the slide where it is in the actual volumes. So this is the same table that's in strategy, design, transition, operation, or CSI, the various appendices. I've reproduced that diagram for you, of course, with permission, and it is in that handout. So let's just look at that table right now and up front. First of all, how do you read it? Well, very simply, the life cycle stage is in column 1. The second column is examples of inputs from other life cycle stages. So what are other life cycle stages providing to service strategy? The last column, where it says examples of outputs to other service life cycle stages, we're talking about, for example, the first life cycle stage, which is strategy, what strategy provides to the other 4 life cycle stages. Okay, you don't need to be a Rhodes Scholar to figure that one out, but you have to keep this in mind of who's getting what from whom. So during all of the time of your process design and trying to create an integrated design for service management across your enterprise, these are some very, very good points to understand, remember, and deploy. Okay, so how do I remember this stuff? Because there's lots of bullet points, right? So you're looking at this and going, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Well, let's first of all look for the patterns, right? So if you look at examples of outputs to other service lifecycle stages, which is column 3, for service strategy, it starts off vision, mission, strategy, strategic plans, policies, financial information. Quite frankly, you can figure this out if you just remember the processes that are in strategy. Now look at service design. And if you look at the first column, that is the inputs from, right? So this is examples inputs from. Well, the first column is saying, hey, service design is going to get vision, mission, strategy, strategic plans. They're going to get the information from strategy. We're going to see that repeated over and over again. In reality, you need to know 5 groups of information. Find the 5 groups, and you have the table. So what is service strategy going to provide? They're going to provide it to all of the other life cycle phases. What does service design provide? Well, service design is going to give us service portfolio updates. They're going to give us the service design package. They're going to give us security policies. Again, think of the processes that are in service design and what are their outcomes. Well, that information is going to be provided not only to strategy, but to transition, operation, and CSI. So there's a set of information. And we can continue doing that same sort of pattern looking or pattern finding throughout this entire table, and quite frankly, throughout the next 5 tables. So there really isn't a whole lot of new information. It's applying the outputs of one phase as an input to the other phase and realize that it's not linear. So design would provide back to strategy service portfolio updates because of service catalog management, right? So in reality, to help you, or not in reality, but in practice, to help you do this, start creating your own tables. And jot down, okay, this is what I know. Jot down 2 or 3 things as an input and an output between these life cycle phases, okay? As you do that, you're going to expand what you know, because you're all of a sudden realize, oh, I just thought of something really cool for an output to, service transition. But in reality, it also can be applied to CSI. Perfect. You're understanding how of these phases go together. Then review your lists against these tables. Is it worth memorizing these tables? And I'm going to tell you flat out, no. Use up the brain cells on something else that's just a little bit more important. This is something you can always go and look up. But you need to have that high level of understanding, and that's where you need to make your own way. Okay, so there's the generic service lifecycle inputs and outputs. So let's go and look at the same sort of information, but let's go phase by phase. So we're going to look at service strategy from a perspective of inputs and outputs to design, to transition, to operation, and then to CSI. Now, this table is found in service strategy. It's table 3.21, and it's also reproduced for you in that handout packet. So make sure that you have that, have that in front of you. Okay, so again, we have the same sort of column nomenclature here, but this time now we're being very specific. So now in column 1, we have the life cycle stage, and since we're in strategy, the other 4 stages would be listed: design, transition, operation, and CSI. Column 2 is service strategy inputs. So this is what service strategy would receive from the life cycle phase in column 1. In column 3, service strategy outputs, and this is what service strategy gives to the life cycle phase in column 1, and in this case, service design. Now, let's just look at the service strategy outputs. They all stay vision and mission, portfolio, policies, strategy and strategic plans, priorities, service charters, change proposals, financial information, patterns of business activity, strategic risks, service models. I mean, there's a variation of those in between which life cycle phase that they're hitting, but they're all pretty much the same thing. This is what service strategy does. Now, how does this, how would the other life cycle phases provide information to strategy? Well, what is the output of design? Well, design has, some input into the business case development, that they will provide some updates to the service portfolio, including the service catalog. They'll provide some financial estimates and reports, et cetera, et cetera. So think about the processes that are in service strategy, the 5 processes that are there. So you have strategy management, portfolio management, financial management, demand management, business relationship management. What information do those 5 processes require from the other life cycle phases? And you'll start again seeing the same pattern. Look for the patterns, okay? So I'm hoping that you're starting to see a larger pattern take place. So let's look at the next one. So now we're going to look at service design and its inputs and outputs to the other life cycle phases. So this is going to be found in the service design volume. It's table 3.7. Okay, so it's the same layout. I'm not going to go through the layout again, but let's quickly just look at service strategy. Service strategy will provide to the service design, can you take a guess? Gee, it's going to be the vision and mission, the portfolio, the policies, the strategies, the priorities, the service charters. Again, this is something that you should already start seeing. This is the trend in the making of these diagrams. The service design outputs to service strategy. It says input to business cases and the portfolio, the service design package, updated service models. I think we've seen that before. Have we not seen that on a previous table? And again, we're going to go through this and say, okay, so what would service transition do for service design? Well, what are the processes in service transition, and how would their activities impact service design? Well, one of the activities within service design is designing measures and metrics, designing the technical architectures, designing the service solution. Well, transition needs to have input into that, do they not? Because they will eventually have to test and roll out those designs. We can say the same thing in service operations. So inputs from service operation into service design, operational requirements, performance information, historical incident and problem records that will say, hey, maybe you need to consider a change in how you do your designs, etc. So again, now you can start seeing the relationship between these phased inputs and outputs. Okay? Starting to see a bigger picture. There's going to be a repeat. As you look down the service design outputs, if you look at transition, operation, and CSI, wow, service catalog, service design package, RFCs, it says it over and over and over. Okay, so those are some of the key products within that service design phase. So let's go ahead and look at transition. Again, we're going to compare what strategy, design, operation, and CSI will provide to service transition if you have the service transition volume. And I hope that you have access or own all 5 volumes. Totally important for MALC. And as a future ITIL expert, you should have access to those 5 volumes. This is going to be found in the service transition volume. It's table 3.1. Same sort of setup. And if you just look at strategy, inputs to transition, wow, vision, mission, portfolio, policies, strategies, priorities, change proposals, financial information. Are you seeing the repeat? The input from service design into transition, service catalog information, the SDP, RFCs for the transition of new or changed service. Operations, same thing, RFCs for the operational issues. Performance information, and going on and on. What are the outcomes of service transition? Well, think about the processes again. What are the processes in ST? So you have TPS, transition planning and support, change, config, release and deployment, change evaluation, service validation and testing, knowledge management. You have these processes. What are their outcomes, their work products, and how valuable are they to the activities of the other life cycle phases? You can make this up. You do not need, it's just a little bit of thought and organizing the information that you have. Confirm your own tables with what's provided to you in the guidance, and then add to it as you go through and continue to work within service management. Okay, so let's look at another one here, and it's the same principles. Let's look at service operation. It's going to be compared to, obviously, strategy, design, transition, and CSI. This is the table found in the service operation volume. It's table 3.5. Again, reproduced for you here. This is a little bit of a shorter one, but if we start right up front with strategy, strategy provides to service operation what? And I'm starting to hear an echo from you all as you're thinking. The vision and the mission, the portfolio, the policies, the strategy, and the priorities. Okay, we're going to get that one down, aren't we? What's design going to provide? Okay, the echo's coming back. The catalog, the SDP. What are our vital business functions? What are our designs? How does service operation input? The SLAs, the OLAs. What about transition? The newer change services, known errors from the design and development aspect, standard changes, so for that request fulfillment piece, the change schedule itself. So you can start seeing that the work products, the products from the various processes are now becoming inputs for the service operational phase. Well, what does operations give back? Well, our capabilities. So what are some of the operating risks? They could give back data for calculating total cost of ownership, performance data, They could be submitting RFCs for correcting of operational issues. They could be members of the Change Advisory Board. They could be definite inputs into overall improvements. Again, this should be coming very, very simple. It's not a difficult concept. It's a little overwhelming with the number of items and the number of charts, but it's fairly straightforward if you look for the patterns. Last one. So we talk about CSI, and again, so we'll compare it to strategy, design, transition, operation, and this is going to be found in table 3.1 and the CSI volume. Same structure within the table, and since we're on this last table, I'm just going to make the statement now. By no means are these tables the absolute be-all, end-all. There are other inputs and outputs that are not on the table, and you find them as you work within industry. So this is something to get you started, to consider thinking. And as you work within your own organization, you may find different and more valuable inputs and outputs. Perfectly well and good. That's the whole point of a framework. So I'm going to ask the question again. So we have strategy. It provides inputs into CSI. What would those inputs be? Wow. Do we have the vision, mission, the portfolio, the policies, the strategies and plans, the priorities, financial information and budgets, and we can continue to go on and on there. CSI, remember, nothing is out of scope within CSI, so its outputs into strategy or design or transition is all about or is going to be surrounding the concept of information to drive improvements, or at least to consider improvement and either make it or not, depending on the data that is coming from the CSI group. So again, find those patterns. All right. So hopefully that is a little bit straightforward, kind of took some of the ugly out of these various charts. We have a few other mandatory required information learning that we need to do. So make sure that, that you continue to stay tuned and read those volumes as we go through and look for that information. Thanks very much for joining us, and looking forward to seeing you again in the future.